Three. All right. Bismillah. How are you?
How are you? Thank you. I'm fine. How are you? How's it going?
We're doing good. They finally threw me out of that so-called academic Shaykhi, Bobby, and Baha'i list on Facebook run by two very irritating German moderators. One is this guy.
Tobias. You're talking about Tobias. And by the way, he didn't make it accessible, to the public.
It's a private list. I actually have about,
yes.
I have several accounts that I actually went on that list and got enrolled on that list years ago. And I've left all these accounts there dormant. And I started only posting in that place recently for a very specific reason, is because these Baha'i cultists on this place are literally inciting to violence and hatred. They are engaging in literal hate speech against the Baha'i community. One of their members, this African guy by the name of Aziz Maboya, went on record basically calling the Baha'i community kuffar and covenant breakers, right? Now, I've been monitoring all of this stuff for years for very specific reasons, because I'm building a case against the Baha'i organization. And because of these sorts of incitements to hatred, and obviously incitements to violence, although they will deny it, real world things have happened to real Bayani's. For example, the suspicious death of Roya does still, I believe, have a Baha'i connection, and so do the Germans think that this may be the case, the German Bundeskriminalamt. Then we have the issue that back in 2018, one of the members of the Baha'i community of Iran, who was merely arguing theological points with a couple of Baha'is on Facebook, all of a sudden gets a summons in Iran itself from the Ministry of Intelligence and ends up being held in custody for 73 hours, questioned and interrogated by IR security agents about his beliefs and what he was doing on Facebook. Now, given that there are millions of Iranians from Iran itself on Facebook, why would the Ministry of Intelligence make a summon to a member of the Baha'i community who was also using a fake name on Facebook, unless the Baha'is went and ratted on him? And this wasn't the first instant that this has actually even happened to other members of the Baha'i community. These Baha'is, this goes beyond just discourse. What they're doing is that they are, first of all, because of the way that they have entrenched themselves in the various groups and establishments and whatnot everywhere, including in Iran, they are using authorities everywhere as a means to go after their political enemies. Now, they're not quite there yet, that they can do things with impunity. But under authoritarian regimes, they appear to have the kind of leverage where they can get someone arrested and held in custody by security forces in Iran on just on a whim, basically.
Point blank. Wade, I personally never cease to wonder about the mystery of, these people's modus operandi. Let me tell you, I've never understood what it's got to do with the niggling laws of Islam or Christianity or Judaism. These laws were certainly very helpful, in establishing and maintaining the social order for thousands of years. But we crossed them past, right? But in that day, are not fundamentally different from the laws of secular states and institutions. The third of the biblical 10 commandments, as you know, instructs human never to make wrongful use of the name of God. Many understand this in a very childish way as a prohibition on uttering the explicit name of God, as in the famous cartoons sketch that says, if you say Jehovah, these blah, blah, blah things will happen to you. Perhaps the deeper meaning of these commandments is that we should never use the name of God to justify your political interests, or economic ambitions, or personal hate.
Much easier said than done, because everybody has done this, and including
that's right. People hate somebody. These people hate somebody and say God hates him. People, covet a piece of land and say God wants it, the way the Zionists say and argue about, their colonialist occupation of Palestine. The
Yeah.
world would be a much better place if we followed, this third commandment more devotedly. You want to wage war on your neighbors, on your friend, on your ex-friend, steal their land, steal their money, steal their identity. Leave God out of it and find yourself some other excuse. But this uh, pseudo community of sheikhs or Baha'is, I don't know what they're thinking of. The whole conception of God. When all is said and done, it's a matter of semantics.
Sure.
When I use the word Shaykhi, I think of Shaykhi as an Islamic state, of the Crusades, or maybe just, but you can't say that, God hates him or God hates that, as it happened in the past, after the passing of your wife, Roya, they didn't even bother, to make a condolence note,
Of
they
course,
didn't.
I mean, then I'm the number one according to to their own statements, and including that article by Mujan Momin, marginality and apostasy. I am one of their number one enemies. They're never going to give me a condolence for the death of my wife, and in fact, I believe on very strong evidence that they were involved in whatever happened to Roya. So I'm not going to get, but I did certain distant family members living in the United States, not immediate ones, but distant family members who I haven't spoken to for over a decade and a half, all of a sudden found my phone number in Berlin and would call me, and in Farsi, they would say things that, "Shoma az taraf Hazrat Baha'u'llah mu'azzabit." You're being punished from Baha'u'llah. As an explanation as to why Roya passed away. I wish the telephone in Berlin that we had a recorder, because I would have certainly put this all up in public online. But this is the way these people are. They against the Bionic community. Now they try to say that we are doing the same thing to them by merely criticizing them and also bringing issues of the legitimacy of their cult vis-a-vis the Bayan. But the fact of the matter is that these people are overtly in the public forum inciting to violence and hatred, criminally actionable things in Europe, in the European jurisdiction. And they have a assortment of these, white German and Anglo-American academics actually helping them. This is part of the problem. Like I've been saying for years now, this organization is part of the greater Anglo-American establishment. And so they're allowed to get away with things, including inciting to murder and hatred and violence against their political and religious enemies. So this is the way of things until the day comes that they are brought to book. This will be business as usual. But however, I've also inflicted quite a bit of damage to these people and agitated them to no end. Number one, the issues that drove these people crazy, besides the fact that I was present there, was number one, I brought up the issue of Sabit and or actually they brought it up themselves. And what we've said about the disappearance of the First National Spiritual Assembly of Iran in 1979, and also the issue of the culpability of Habib Sabit in that incident, and also the possible, his possible involvement in the disappearance of Dan Jordan. Now, this is I have touched a sensitive nerve here with this, and this goes back years, right? The other issue that they had a real big problem with is the information that you found, and then the personal secretaries of Francesca Schreiber confirmed, and that is that the late Udo Schaefer was actually seen at an AfD rally in 2014. Now, if you Google the name of Udo Schaefer, you also get the name. You also get the name of a member of the AfD itself. They actually have a member, a AfD member, who's actually now running for some local seat on behalf of the AfD. But the actual Baha'i Udo Schaefer, and this is what I tried to get established by the secretaries of Francesca Schreiber about what they had claimed that they had there had been a
So
Baha'i.
you're explicitly saying that Yuda Schaefer, according to overwhelming evidence,
Yeah.
was a proponent of AFD and far-right,
Well,
extremist.
we don't know. This is the thing. We don't know whether he was a proponent, an advocate, or otherwise. What is known, and this is based on the information that these former secretaries of Schreiber told me, is that this individual, they had known that there was a Baha'i that came to one of their rallies in 2014 in one of the southern German cities. Then further inquiries by them, not by me, by them, established that this was Yuda Schaefer.
Yuda Schaefer.
So whether he was an actual sympathizer to the AFD or not, that's a speculative question. But why would anybody go to a AFD rally unless they were sympathetic to his political platform?
That's right. I've got a question for you. How would you work out, this missing link, this assorted missing link between, the Shaykhis, the Baha'is, and the fundamental characteristics of their deeds against the Baha'i community?
Well, let's start from this angle. First of all, let's look at, the claim that the Baha'is are making in terms of gatekeeping, at least in cyberspace and in the Ivory Tower, the very subject of Shaykhism. Now, I happen to know quite a few of these people. They're also distantly related to me through my father, through the Kermani branch. But also, someone like Idris Samawi Hamid is a personal friend of mine. I've been friends with him for over 20 years now. A great scholar, Black American scholar. I consider this man literally to be even practically the return of Sheikh Ahmad Asai. But most Shaykhis, real life followers of the Kashfi Maktab of Sheikh Ahmad Asai, Sayyid Kazim Rashdi, are not happy about the fact that the Baha'is are basically occupying the study of their creed, claiming, almost a form of ownership over it in the same way that they're doing to the community of the Bayan, right? I have talked to a lot of these people, whether from, my extended Kermani, side of the family, or people who belong to the various Ehqaqi circles, or otherwise. And even groups of, Shaykhis who are not affiliated with any of these people, we're not happy about, because if you go online and you type Shaykhism, and almost, the entirety of the first couple of pages that come up are Baha'i related stuff. And it's not because the Baha'is have published more than anybody else, is that because the Baha'is will make invisible the studies of other people on the subject that does not, align with their agenda of how they want to represent the Shaykhi school. So this particular list on Facebook, this academic study of Shaykhism, Babism, and Baha'ism, is just an extension of the Baha'i attempt of gatekeeping the subject, and particularly then being represented, rather than being represented by the likes of Idris Samawi Hamid, who, as far as I'm concerned, is the most preeminent Shaykhi scholar of the age. You have these, know-nothing, white Anglo-American scholars, who are gatekeeping the subject, which in my opinion is also a species of, this racial contract or white supremacy that Charles Mills so eloquently details in his book by the same name, The Racial Contract. That list, particularly, other than, your one or two token Iranians, who are just a bunch of lunatic fundamentalist Baha'is, the vast majority of people on these Baha'i-oriented lists on Facebook are very white. They're all Anglo-Europeans, right? And as I've established time and time again, when push comes to crunch with most of these people, you begin to see the kind of things that Charles Mills actually details in his book, right? All of them, whether they are liberals or even have disenchantment against the system itself, when push comes to crunch, they will always pull rank with each other. All white people, all Anglo-Europeans in this particular circle of people will pull rank and impose the racial contract against any person of color, especially if they happen to be an Iranian, non-Baha'i, and articulate and outspoken like I am. And so, none of the behavior of these people surprises me, but the fact of the matter is that I went there to collect intelligence and also to do very similar things that were done by me and friends of mine back in the last decade on that site, Iranian.com. You know, these Baha'is, and especially Susan Manek, who's lurking on that academic list, should know, because she was there on Iranian.com, that myself and other people associated with me, we destroyed that site, Iranian.com. We blew it up. And we blew it up because that site was an overtly anti-Iranian site. This was a site where you had ads coming up for the Israeli military, where you had people claiming to be Iranians under anonymous names, basically preaching anti-Iranian separatist and also just completely, warmongering talking points about, initiating war against Iran and against the Iranian people, etc. Like I have said again and again, we can be in disagreement and we can be in opposition to the Islamic Republic of Iran. I am. But the issue, there is a red line with me, with these people. First of all, these Anglo-Americans and Zionists, where Iran is concerned, can all collectively go to hell. Iran is our country. It is not your country. You have interest. You want to install puppet regimes like the puppet regime that you had for over 50-something years in the Pahlavi dynasty. We want to take matters into our own hands. The issue of toppling the IRI is our business, not your business. Please go to hell. Furthermore, we want no influence by a so-called religious organization, which is actually a cult, in the form of the Baha'is in a future post-IR Iran. These people should have no influence whatsoever, political, economic, or otherwise. At the moment, because of the completely corrupt, kleptocratic, and kakistocratic nature of the Islamic Republic of Iran, these people have managed to infiltrate that system, especially on the economic level. We have the testimony of Farzam Kamalabadi himself, but other people on the ground who are witnessing that a great section and chunk of the Iranian economy in Tehran itself is being controlled by these people. Like, for example, steel works, cement works, heavy machinery. These are the basic building blocks of any modern economy anywhere. These are all industries controlled by the Baha'is.
It's very cheap
in Tehran.
Like a magician, fooling an audience by imperceptibly, replacing one card with another, know.
Yeah.
But the thing is, despite there is certainly a logical, connection between these two,
mm-hmm.
Yet again, they are in fact contradictory. The deeper the mysteries of their activities, the less likely it is whether it is or they are responsible, for them giving a damn about, for instance, Iranians or people of color,
Look,
because they claim the people of color are welcome in UU society, but
look,
in fact, we see otherwise.
Here's the tale of the rooster on the issue of human rights and the fact that the Baha'is are full of shit where that is concerned. Baha'is have spent the last 5 years during the Saudi war on the Yemeni people, basically railing against the Houthis, right? The Houthis being the only force in Yemen right now who has put up an incredible resistance to this Saudi-American war on the people of Yemen, right? So the question is, number one, what are Baha'is doing in Yemen in the middle of a number one, a civil war, number two, an American Saudi Gulf-led war against the people of Yemen? Number three, why instead of remaining silent or condemning even both sides, condemning the Saudis and condemning the Houthis, why are the Baha'is condemning the Houthis and remaining silent about the genocidal activities of the Saudi-led war against the Yemeni people? Why is that? That is the case because Baha'is, fundamentally, the Hyphen Baha'i organization, as a puppet of the Anglo-American Zionist empire, doesn't give a shit about people of color, and especially Arabs, and Yemenis particularly. And this should be extremely instructive to the Iranian people, that if the day arrives that we finally do get a situation where people want to attack Iran, that do realize that these Hyphen Baha'is are wolves in sheep's clothing. These people are going on a daily basis selling Iran and Iranians out to these imperial powers, whether it be Israel, whether it be the United States or the Europeans. So Iranians should be under no illusion of what kind of a force that we're dealing with. This is a fifth column, right? It is not, and it is, despite all their pretensions otherwise, as an organization, they don't give a damn about Iran. According to someone like Abdullah Shahbazi and also, Robert Dreyfus, in fact, the revolution in Iran, 1979 revolution, in many ways was actually triggered by the Baha'is, right? Because there was an institutional war within the Pahlavi regime that while Asadullah Alam was alive, right, he held in check. But the minute he passed away from cancer, these Baha'is, rather than try to reform the system under the Shah, wanted to see this thing completely destabilized so that then they could capitalize at a certain point in the future and bring forth their own agendas overtly. Now, this is quite a theory. Abdullah Shahbazi believes in it, and independently, Robert Dreyfus believes in the same thing. Dreyfus told me in 2011 when I talked to him on Skype that he believed that all the various agitations that happened that finally saw Khomeini come back to Iran were from the background being spearheaded by individuals or organizations who are one way or another connected to the Baha'is, to the Haifan Baha'i organization.
It is therefore very no groundless at all. It's not groundless at all. To criticize, the Baha'is and their, quote unquote Shaykhi allies for lacking ethical commitment or social responsibilities. In fact, the main problem with these guys, I believe, is just the opposite.
Hold on just a second. You said Shaykhi allies. They have no Shaykhi allies. The actual Shaykhi groups, whether the Kermani...
I know, it's created from the imaginative narrative,
Yeah,
but
sure. They want, look, in the information age, the assumption is that he who controls the narrative controls, right? So what the Baha'is are doing, they're trying to control the narrative of Shaykhism as well as Babism, etc. Now, we should mention this. The Baha'is are not the allies to any branch of the Shaykhi school. And if you talk to any of these people, whether they're Kamanis or Ehqaqis or otherwise, they cannot stand these people. The fact is that in 1979, we had, when Khomeini came back to Iran, two forces within the greater Shiite Iranian milieu that for some time actually posed an opposition to the Baha'is were eliminated from the political scene. Number one, the Sakar Aghay Ibrahimi, the head of the Shaykhi school of Kerman, someone went into his house in the middle of the night and killed his sons and suffocated him in his own room. For years, the system tried to blame it on this fictitious group known as the Furqan, the same people who they claim were responsible for the assassination of Ayatollah Motahari. But there's more to this story than that. Then, on top of that, the way that the Ayatollah Khomeini shut down the Hojatiyya Society, and basically after the parliamentary elections, I believe right after the Constituent Assembly, when you had the parliamentary elections for the Majlis, the first Majlis of the IRI, Sheikh Mahmoud Halabi was campaigned against actively by Khomeini personally, and Halabi didn't win a single seat from Mashhad. And then in the following year, in 1980, basically under Khomeini's own instructions, the Hojatiyya Society and its activities were shut down all throughout Iran, and Sheikh Mahmoud Halabi was relegated to, living in his house. With all of his political support, the infrastructure that the Hojatiyya Society had built completely shut down. Now, you look at this. No one did as big a favor to the Baha'is as the Ayatollah Khomeini did. It really is as simple as that. Back in Khomeini, if this had been a genuine revolution and not some kind of a coup d'etat, all he would have had to do is to pass a fatwa of takfir against the Baha'is, and that would have been the end of these people in Iran. He never did that. And there's a reason for this, is because in his trial in 1963 and 1964, the attorney, his defense attorney, was a Baha'i by the name of Shah Quli. It was a Baha'i that let Khomeini off a certain execution sentence because, under,
There
due to what
was
happened.
there was another one by the name of Mehdi Amin,
Mehdi, I
who
mean, yeah,
to be in mind, the national council of Iran,
yes,
national spiritual assembly of Iran, the second one, who worked back then under his supervision, under Shah Wali's supervision.
yeah, under Shah Wali. But Shah Wali, I mean, basically, if it wasn't for Shah Wali, Khomeini would have been executed. As
Oh
simple as
yes.
that. They would have taken him to the gallows and shot him. He was the person that convinced the military court to let Khomeini off and out of Iran. And so this is how Khomeini ended up in Najaf. So the activities and the role of the Baha'i community of Iran in saving even the life of the Ayatollah Khomeini in 1963 in a regime that they were infiltrating at the time and had their own people in, such as Ayadi and Hojabri Yazdani, Habib Sabit Pasal, etc. It was them who instrumentalized saving Ayatollah Khomeini and out of Iran, right? So, I tend to look at the words of people like Abdullah Shahbazi when they say these sorts of things, or Robert Dreyfus. I look at it as possessing credibility. Their greater view about this, I think, is true. That this is what was going on, because the situation in Iran for these people, despite the fact that they have capitalized on the status of their community under the Islamic Republic pretty much since 1979 in the West. The fact is that the Ayatollah Khomeini did a massive favor for these people, consistently. There was, as we know about the Islamic Republic, as we know about the IRI, they do a lot of things for show, right? And the Baha'i organization itself is a master of doing things that show, right? And the callousness of people at the top, these apparatchiks of the system in Baha'ism is the same sort of callousness that you find in the IRI itself. So they have no compunction in sacrificing individuals, getting individual Baha'is or, one or two members here then imprisoned or executed to keep this facade going. On top of that, we know that Muhammad Jawad Bahonar, his entire extended family in Kirman are all Baha'is. So the nexus of Baha'is with the Islamic Republic of Iran is a pretty deep one, right? So, make of this what you will.
Finally, my final question goes back to an argument that, the Baha'is for so long, have been making, a case against the Bayan, saying that it sets the Bayan, the book, it sets the ethical bar way too high. So most people just cannot live up to such a demanding code. Therefore, large societies cannot be run on the basis of the Bayan, especially in times of emergency.
I don't even know what to say. I don't even know what to say to an argument like that. So now the criticism is that the ethical bar is too high in the Bayan. Isn't this a species of exactly the same kind of nonsense that the Quraysh were saying to the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him? You're setting the bar too high. We can't actually do what you're asking us. What kind of argument is that?
They said we need clear guidance. We need catchy slogans, and inspiring, battle cries that Hazrat Baha'u'llah, quote unquote, that Baha'u'llah has provided us quite completely.
Well, Hazrat Baha'u'llah, rather, provided what kind of guidance? I mean, there are so many contradictions throughout the writings of Mirza Hussain Ali Nuri that one doesn't know where to start. I put my finger on one of them last time in this short podcast I made about his claim that no one will come of his rank and stature and station in the next 500,000 years. I mean, this whole idea basically upends any notion of progressive revelation that the Bayan presents, or even that the Baha'is claim to advocate for. Setting the bar, the ethical bar too high. Look, the Baha'is from the very beginning, the very mentality of this organization and these people is a species of the corporate mentality of the West, right? So they act in a compact corporate manner. This is the very ontology of these people. They are interest-based, agenda-based, right? And yes, some, a text like the Bayan or the vision that the Bayan unfolds is actually too much for these people. They can't actually fulfill it. Why? Because then it would make many of their behaviors over the last 100 years impossible. This duplicity, lying, like I have said before, I consider these people the very initiators of fake news. These people created the very, they created all of this stuff. Changing history, tahrif, munharif, of text.
Deviation, right.
Yeah, destroying and changing the very narrative of the actual factual narrative of history to accord with their own points of view at any given time, what Dennis McEwen has called conflation. All of these things, they have committed, and there's such a large documentary trail about these people doing this, and so many different people have called them out on it. Whether we're talking about Brown and Nicola, or various Iranian scholars like Mohit Tabatabahi, and on and on and on and on and on these examples go. But because they are a corporate organization with a specific set of interests that they wish to implement, one of which the goal is to attain political power, and particularly in Iran, they will go out of their way, to cover things up, to change the narratives of history, to lie, and then to pack their own people in the Western institutions of higher learning, and on and on and on these examples go. But nevertheless, whatever the West does is what the West does. These systems in the West are beginning to now crumble, as we're seeing. One thing that we're taking away from the Trump era is the depth of the sickness of the Anglo-American world and Anglo-European world in general. I'm no fan of the Russians. I'm no fan of their, geopolitical approach to the bigger question of international politics. I don't like the Chinese very much. I think they're also a problematic force in the world. But one thing that they must be thanked for, in a sense, is they have weakened the Anglo-American empire like never before. So, whether Biden can restore anything or not, I doubt it very much. But this is a contribution that these people have made. And as a result of all of this, the Baha'is are weakening. And, if we do actually get a genuine multipolar world, which I don't think we're going to get it in this rosy picture that is being painted of it, the influence of the Baha'is will be cut to size. Why? Because the Baha'is are globalists. They're not internationalists, like Marxists are. They're globalists. They represent the neoliberal consensus of the Anglo-American empire, Anglo-European world. They represent, the narrative of white supremacy in every way. That list, the academic Sheikh Bobby Baha'i list, is a perfect example of all these various white faces, European faces, appropriating the narratives and the theologies of a people, from the East, but these people for the last 100 years have felt entitled to this. So this is another issue of it, that there is a sense of entitlement that these white Baha'is, or whatever they are, have towards Shaykhism, towards the religion of the Bayan, and even including Baha'ism itself, which is, technically an Eastern religion. Whatever manicuring that has been done to the image of this cult, the fact of the matter is that this is it's a Iranian Islamic originating creed. It did not start in Europe. It didn't start in the United States.
That's right. Final question, Raid. In my humble opinion, the major problem lies with the ontology of the existence of Baha'is,
Yeah.
because these people cherish irresponsibility. They don't believe in any higher power, that takes care of the world, punishes the wicked, rewards the just, and protect us from plague of war, except the U at Universal House of Justice. This U at J that is supposed to take power sooner or later,
Yeah.
and does whatever it wants to do.
Well, this is what I keep on saying, that they're a corporate-centric organization. That means that morality, etc., is enshrined in the will of an organization. It's a form of, it's a species of Hobbes, right? The Baha'i
No,
conception,
sorry,
it's a
let me
species, yeah.
rephrase it. Let me rephrase it. If the world, according to Baha'i, is full of misery and shit, therefore it is naturally your duty, to find solutions. But they say, okay, we are keeping away from the problems until the universal house of justice, gets rises, from the ashes of, the crumpled gold. That's what.
But see, this is a nonsensical argument. It is complete crap. It is lie. It is basically a mechanism to lure people into their organization without any further thing to it. We are waiting until the old world order collapses in order to then make the rebuild the world. Well, if that is the case, then why are you collaborating with Western imperialism and Zionism? The very forces in this old world that are responsible for rivers of blood and for all the problems that we're seeing at the moment. Why are you engaging? Why are you thriving under the system of neoliberal capitalism? Why not take the principled stand and start to build, communitarian forms of society? Why do you have to wait until all of this collapses? And besides, what mechanisms do you possess that if a collapse ever came, that you could actually rebuild, a society, a collapsed society, recreate economies of scale, but on a more level communitarian kind of basis? They don't have any of this stuff. This is,
instead of, I believe,
they don't have any of it.
That's what I'm saying. Instead of praying for the collapse of the world or secularism, they need to ask what they can do to help.
They have nothing to help. They their own. This is, look, as I've been saying for so long, this is a organization who looks at its ideology as a product. So since that is the case, they behave like a Western corporation, right? Protecting its product, protecting its market turf, etc., and then trying to expand into other markets and do hostile takeovers, etc., which I'm asserting is what is going on with their attempt to take over the entire subject of Shaykhism, the Babism, etc. This is what these people are about. Everything else is nonsense that these people say, right? And evidence of this is the following, and we've talked about this in other contexts. We've also talked about this with Hassan Ershad. You can show all the scriptural and theological inconsistencies of the writings of Baha'u'llah, Abdul Baha, and Shoghi Effendi until you're blue in the face. These people don't care. It will not move them, right? Their issue is something completely different. So, Ershad said something very funny. He said that you can swear at Baha'u'llah, Abdul Baha, and Shoghi Effendi, but God help you if you do that to the UHJ. That is extremely revealing. That is basically telling us that these people are basically chattel, aknahullah, of an organization. It is about the organization, which then they craft with all kinds of rhetoric about unity and this, that, and the other thing. But this is the outlook of this. In other words, the mafia, right? So the various codes of omerta, etc., all of this all apply. It is about the corporation. It's about the product that this corporation's CEO is protecting and the markets that they want to expand to, etc. This is all what it's about. And this is why this is not a religion. This is a cult.
For similar reasons, right, do you believe that, the Baha'is teaching, meaning a negative indoctrination, that teaches kids, not to believe in responsibility and rather to take part in religious ceremonies?
Well, from what we're hearing from people, even prominent Baha'is, I mean, even, someone there once say someone like Kavyan Milani. I mean, most of these parents are no longer sending their children to these religious events. They're not so confident about the moral fiber of the contemporary Baha'i community in order to send their own children to these functions. That's very telling. But then again, they continue in this charade because they, their self-interest is attached to this organization. So they continue with the charade as long as it's going to take. It's as simple as that. But from where we're concerned, we have to stop these people is because they have, for far too long, they have encroached on our territory. They have lied about us. They have criminally incited violence and hatred against the Baha'i community for over 100 years. They wish to control the narrative. They wish to manipulate perceptions around the world about who we are, right? And there has to be resistance to this. And luckily, there is resistance forming to it. And we will eventually, inshallah, we will be victorious against this cult one way or another. And just remember, the use-by date of the Baha'is is connected to the use-by date of the Anglo-American Zionist Empire. The day that this crumbles, they will go as well. It is very straightforward as that. So, I think we should look at the long term of all of this and not be perturbed or not be dissuaded and not be let down by current circumstances. Yes, there's a huge obstacle in front of us, but we will overcome this obstacle one way or another. And I think we should leave it there. La hujja ila aliyan qabla nabiyya.